during which
Hello, you're through the books, boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling?
I'm Sara Staggs, and I am the author of a book we're going to talk about today.
Awesome, sir. That's fantastic. We were indeed just talking about your book, Uncontrollable. Before I even read the book, I love the cover. It's a very powerful cover. Absolutely fantastic.
That's all. Yeah. David King at the publishing company did a great job. It's fantastic.
It's very nice. It's powerful. It kind of lends a little mystique. It makes me want to open it up and read it. This is 300 pages, and I think I was hitting about 150 a day because it's one of those kind of page turners that it has a fast pace and you just don't want to put it down. So that's fantastic. I want to ask you though, because I read a little bit about yourself as well. So we've talked about what happens in the novel just before you rang in. I want to ask you what motivated you to write the novel. Obviously, there's some ties with your own life. You do litigation, you've got the epilepsy and things like that. So the tie-ins are real, but this isn't necessarily biographical. It's just drawing on some of your own experiences. Is that right?
Yes, it was inspired by some of my experiences, and I've had 2 brain surgeries in the past 5 years. And so the pre-surgical workups were pretty traumatic. So I kept a journal in the hospital both times. And when I came home, I just started writing and using it as therapy, really. And then I started looking at what I'd written and thought, oh, well, maybe if I make some characters and fictional backstories
Fictionalize it a little bit
together. Yeah. It could be a novel. Maybe people would be interested in this. And it turns out that that is true.
So how much of I don't want to say how much of it is true, but how much of it is fictionalized, I suppose, is what I want to ask.
So it's all fictionalized to different degrees. So the medical scenes are what would be called autofiction, which is autobiographical fiction. So, I mean, the term doesn't actually make sense because if it's autobiographical, it's true, right? And if it's fiction, it's fiction. But that's just what it's called in the writing industry. And then the backstories and the characters themselves and their journeys personally, those are just pure fiction.
Cool. I'm a sucker for romance, so my biggest tie-in is like the love story between the couple. Like I want to find out what's happening with Casey and Jonah, and hopefully it's not giving too many spoilers away to say that they have some little speed bumps and some setbacks throughout the novel in their relationship. And it kind of, that's the reason I couldn't put it down, is because they were well written and I wanted to know what was going to happen with their story. And they're fantastic. And it's interesting as well because it wasn't one of those books where, okay, I'm siding with this person and I don't like what they're doing to this person. It's kind of like, okay, I like them both. I can see where they're both coming from. Was that deliberate that you kind of equally like them both?
It was. My husband, first of all, would like me to emphasize that he is not Jonah. So anyone reads this book, any part where Jonah is behaving badly, that is not based on my husband's behavior. But second of all, it was deliberate because I wanted them both to be flawed, right? Because no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And it would make it more realistic. And yet I wanted you to be able to root for both of them because for those of your listeners who haven't read it, it's written in 2 voices. So one chapter will be Casey and the next will be Jonah, and Casey and Jonah, and so forth. So I did want to write characters that readers could relate to and be able to root for, but also know, like, yeah, I see that. I know that a marriage is not perfect. And I know that people are not perfect, but I like these people.
Yeah, it's good to have that dueling perspective because it balances things, you know, because sometimes they're not necessarily fair with one another. So it's good to see the double perspective.
Yeah, that's another. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's another reason that I chose to do it in 2 voices, because not only does it give a different view into what it means to have a chronic condition in a marriage, but it gives a different view on their sort of career paths and how they interact with each other, so that you don't just see one person's side and the other person automatically becomes the villain, right?
Yeah. Let's give one example. There's the part where Jonah is potentially going to get a promotion. It's not certain at this point, but he thinks he might be in line for a promotion. He doesn't want to tell Casey because, of course, because of her health issues, she's potentially losing out on a promotion or losing out on some work. So he hides that from her. And then there's the guilt of that. And it's kind of like, right, I can see that he's trying to protect her, but he's taking away her agency in that. He's not necessarily treating her like an adult. So you can see both sides. And when it eventually becomes an argument, I'm like, yeah, I agree with you both.
Yeah, so that's an example of how I wanted to make it relatable. I mean, if you have something that is exciting to you, but maybe your spouse is not in the same place, how do you deal with that? And I think that, you know, Jonah's side is fair and not fair. He's doing it because he cares for Casey. Yet, is it fair for Casey? I don't know. It's up to the reader to decide.
That's the thing. And of course, as we go along, there's some things Jonah does that I definitely don't agree with. But certainly in the beginnings, you know, there's something that I think it's Jonah's mum says at the party at one point. She kind of says, no one's really thinking about you. All the attention is on Casey. And of course, that's understandable. She's going through this trauma. But Jonah's not getting it easy either, I suppose. And no one really does stop to take stock of that. So I guess he's struggling too. But of course, what's he going to do? What's he going to say? I'm getting it difficult while she's undergoing the surgery and everything, you know?
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
But,
and that is, I think, very much how a chronic condition can interfere with a marriage, is the person who has the health issues, right, gets all the attention. And then the spouse is kind of given pretty much all the responsibility that's left over, but none of the recognition. And so that builds resentment between Casey and Jonah that kind of plays into their love story.
Yeah. Another interesting theme for me is the horrible bosses. They're awful. So cruel. So we have is it Harold, Casey's boss, and you know his whole vibe is like, well, we've got this important case, so hopefully your health isn't going to get in the way. And she's like, well, I'm gonna need to take some time off for like all this kind of going, you know, all these checks and everything before the surgery to see if I'm a suitable candidate and whatever else. And he's like, oh, cool. So he phones her while he's in the hospital, you know, even to be like, this isn't working. What are you going to do about it? Leave her alone, give her time to deal with her health. Like, that's shocking to me. But then at the same time, Jonah's bosses are kind of like, yeah, you should maybe get a promotion, but we're not too sure because you're busy with your family. And it's like, yeah, he is. That should be reasonable. Is this like you've obviously worked like in litigation and things like that. It's not an area that I've ever worked in. Is this like a typical way for like companies to be like this level of intensity and pressure?
So Harold is actually a combination of a few bosses that I've
had.
I had a boss when I was about 30 who we were going to trial, and I had a seizure and I was unable to come to work the week before the trial. And so this woman sent the legal assistant to my house with the work that I was supposed to do.
No.
And I'd cut my head. And so I had blood that had clotted in my hair. And the legal assistant went back and informed my boss that I had dyed my hair red. And so, Harold has unreasonable expectations, and that's based on a lot of things that I have experienced. And then Jonah's challenge is that people expect men to sort of put their family second and their career first, right? Mm-hmm. They expect women to just juggle it all. And then men are still, as open-minded as our society supposedly is, still expected to kind of sideline the family and just let the woman deal with it and just get on with it, no matter how much the company promotes work-life balance. So that's where Jonah kind of stumbles, is trying to explain to his bosses, hey, I need to put this first. I can still show up at work. These are my parameters. And
he's fair. Like, he does the job, he gets results. Yeah. There's not even a problem. It's just kind of, we want to see, for no real reason, this like overcommitment from you,
Yeah, I think that it's because his bosses are from a different generation.
Yeah.
And so they don't understand. They're from like that Mad Men generation,
Yeah.
sort of, you know, where it was like they didn't really understand how you could use technology to work outside the office. And this is in 2017 is when the book takes place. So it's
Mhm.
before the pandemic,
Yeah.
before things really became like, oh, you can get things done remote. And before like the older generation began to understand that.
Mm.
So
It's strange to think it was so recent, but that's exactly right. Before the pandemic, a lot of 90% of companies weren't even considering that remote work was possible. And it's, you know, just a few years later, it feels so odd, but yeah.
yeah. And now, you know, it's like a 50% you can work from home, 50% everyone's back in the office, but people are much more accepting that if you're not in the office, you can still get work done.
Yeah. And the sad thing is Jonah goes home and he does a little bit of work, but they kind of don't value that, you know. They're like, why are you in the office till 9 p.m.? You know?
Right. Right. And that's his whole thing is like, I can work smarter and faster. I don't have to be here. I
Yeah.
can get just as much done and teach my team how to work more efficiently.
The
And
bit
the
that
bosses are
really,
like, well, we just want the FaceTime.
yeah, they just want the like tick a box. We saw him here. They don't really
Right.
care about what he's doing, you know. The bit that really gets me is when they kind of make a proposition to him and he says, look, I do need to be at home with the family and everything as well. He says, okay, I'll see what I can do. I think I can do the commitment. Like, give me a day to think about it. And they're kind of like, well, you shouldn't even need to think about it. And I'm like, oh, come on.
No. Yeah, but I don't think that that's unreasonable for either men or women. At least in, you know, 2017, maybe
Yeah.
now it's become a little more flexible.
Mm.
But I think that definitely if your bosses were of a different generation and older, then that was something, you know, that you faced. Well, you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to think about it. You just should put work first.
It's sadly realistic, you know, because I read it and I'm like, yeah, this checks out, but it makes me
Yeah.
very mad, you know?
Like, yeah, this tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, meanwhile, it's no easier for Casey because, as we said, Harold's putting on the pressure. She's left you know, an assistant who's perfectly competent to do the work, and Harold's phoning her like, ah, she's messing it up. You know, you got to deal with this. It's like, I'm literally in a hospital bed right now. Like, I cannot possibly do anything. It's madness, but it's part of that hustle and bustle, I suppose. And it's interesting that they're both having, I suppose, in a way, similar kinds of work-related issues, but they're coping with it differently and dealing with it differently. And I just feel so sad for both of them, you know? And then obviously all the medical stuff, the relationship issues that are coming in, they're having a really stressful time. And it's just fantastic that they get through it at all, I think.
Yeah, I didn't want to make it a book just about epilepsy, so it's really quite bigger than that, and it's more, it is a love story and a story about a marriage and its challenges and how you get through challenges or not,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So
Yeah.
it's, there are a lot of different layers to it, which I think people have found to be surprising and relatable.
Yeah. I was thinking, you know, if I was there, if I was Casey, Harold would get a smack on the head at one point. You know, I don't think he's escaping completely unscathed. And then, of course, the funniest thing is he's so worried about the big case, but the only one who's really in jeopardy of messing it up is himself with his own tactlessness.
Right. Yeah. No, and the case actually is a case that I worked on.
Right.
And
Do you want to tell us about it then? So in the book we've got Kathy and we've got well you tell us because you'll tell better than I will.
that's okay. Yeah, so I did civil rights litigation. So for example, if you were mistreated in jail or the cops beat you up and, you know, or your house was unreasonably searched, then you would come to me and I would represent you. And the case in this book is a case that I worked on where a lot of women, about 5 women, were raped by this one guard in prison. And it was reported by a few of them to the superiors, and it was just sort of brushed aside until finally this one woman was really forceful about it.
Mm.
And started making a lot of noise, and it's kind of like the squeaky wheel. And she started writing to attorneys, and then they started, smelling the potential of litigation. And so the guard was put on leave and then fired, and it became a whole thing. And so I ended up working on the case where we represented the 5 women who reported these rapes. And the case ended up settling very successfully. So we didn't go to trial because the government didn't really have a lot to say in the courtroom. But in the book, Casey does go to trial because she doesn't want to settle. She wants to make a point of, no,
Maybe I'm naive, but I was like, why is the Department of Justice or Corrections, whatever, why are they even fighting this? Like they moved the guy off the position and eventually, got rid of him. So they know that he did a bad thing. Right. So in my mind, I'm like, cool. So they've admitted blame. Like that's it. It's why are they even fighting this? Like just settle, just offer something, because they don't really have it. What's the defense? Like they didn't know about it, I guess.
Yeah, that was basically it. Like we didn't know. And the thing is, I mean, at least in the case that I worked on, and as I wrote it, they did know. But they're trying to say we didn't know, and when we did, we looked into it.
Yeah. So that's almost not good enough anyway. So like it still happened, whether you knew or not. That's still your problem. So
right.
Yeah. But we should say that the case is important, because if it weren't for the epilepsy and all the medical issues that are potentially going to end Casey's career, this would be the career-making case. This would be the one that would make her partner and the promotion and everything. And this is what she was looking forward to. But of course, she really, really wants to fight that. And it's understandable that even though she's having seizures, and I think at one point they say 4 in the last 6 weeks, at the beginning of the novel. So although she's having these problems, she's like, doesn't want to admit defeat on it. It's like, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna take on the case no matter how stressful it is, which is understandable. But then poor Jonah is like, I can see what this is doing to your health as well, and this is bad, and if you make yourself more stressed and lead to more seizures, like you could die, and we've got kids and everything. So it's just a shame that the big case came at this moment for her, I suppose. But it's very tense, because I'm like, what was going to happen here? Like, can she handle the stress? Essentially, that's the overarching theme: is can she do this case? And that's what you're really rooting for her. But at the same time, you kind of feel fear and empathy for Jonah, who's kind of like, this might kill you,
Yeah, no, I think that was sort of another thing that I purposefully did in writing, was give you like, Casey wants this so badly, and she just really, it's what she's been working for, right? And you're right, the case comes at an inconvenient time, right? When her health is really deteriorating. And then you see Jonah's side, where he's just like, you need to stop, just stop, just take a beat, because we have kids and this is not good for you, But she's been successful, she's been a Stanford law grad and everything. So she's used to having what she wants when she wants it. And so,
and she's also used to the pressure and the stress. It's just whether she can handle it on this occasion is another question. Well, I don't want to say any more, because I don't want to get towards the last kind of third, and I don't like to spoil anything or say how anything comes out. But why don't you tell us what's in the works next? Are you working on another novel?
I am. I'm working on a young adult, a YA LGBTQ plus novel about a trans teen who lives in Texas. I'm actually from Dallas, Texas, and he lives in a small town. And when a bill passes that makes gender affirming care illegal in Texas, he and his family have to move, because he can't get the medical care that he needs. And so it's a huge problem for them. However, when they move to a place that is very LGBTQ plus supportive. And so he has this whole new life that he didn't have in Texas, where that wasn't the case. And so with this new life and this new freedom comes a lot of challenges, but he gets a love interest, a group of friends, and
nice. And certainly
so
it seems very, I mean, it's very topical, right? These are issues that we're dealing with today, and that are still pressing issues today. So that's fantastic. It's a very, very current issue. When are we going to expect the book?
I think we could expect it in the fall of 2024.
Cool. So we're
Or
looking at
maybe
just
the
over a year.
beginning of 2025. So
nice. But in the meantime, we've got this one, which I'd like to recommend to all the listeners to check out. It is Uncontrollable. Do you want to plug your website and tell them where they can get the book?
That'd be great. Yeah. So you can go to my website, sarastaggswrites.com. It's SARASTAGGS and then writes.com. I'm sure it'll be in the notes. And you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, from my website, some indie bookstores, and you can also go to whatever local bookstore you have and ask them to order it for you.
Cool. I'll put a link to the website anyway in the notes. And Sarah, it's time to ask you the final question that we always ask to all of the authors to call in. If any existing book, so think of all the existing books, if there's any one that you wish you were the person to write, what would that be?
A book that I wish I'd written.
Yeah.
Cutting for Stone by Abraham, oh gosh, what's his last name? Starts with a V, and I don't know how to say it. But it came out about 10 years ago, and it is a fantastic book. And when you buy mine, you should also buy that one.
Okay. Fantastic. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for calling in, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thanks. Bye-bye.